All right, the next chapter we're going to cover is death investigation. I previously told you in a prior lecture that I have a more thorough lecture that I'll be presenting in class on this. This is just going to be basically an overview of the chapter. Uh, you need to go ahead and read your chapter, and then I'll supplement with that lecture, which is built from a forensic death investigation training course. The primary person in a death investigation is the forensic pathologist. Forensic pathologists are medical doctors, and they've completed additional training after receiving their medical degree and also education. In Florida, the forensic pathologist holds the title of medical examiner. In other states, they may hold the title of coroner. And by statute, they are charged with the legal responsibility to determine the cause and manner of death. Sometimes they respond to the death scene to examine the body. Some large medical examiner's offices have their own field investigators who may respond to the scene also or in lieu of the actual medical examiner. Cause of death. The cause of death identifies injury or disease that led to the chain of events resulting in the death. An autopsy is conducted on natural deaths, where the person has had some malady or disease, and they have a attending physician, unless there's some suspicious circumstances. The attending physician will sign off on the death certificate. If not, if there is not an attending physician, then the medical examiner has to determine the cause of death. Cause of death is caused by some sort of an outside implement in homicides, blunt force trauma, which would be striking a victim with a bat or a club or a pipe of some sort. Sharp force injuries, also known as incised wounds, which are committed with cutting type instrument, knives, razor blades, box cutters, those types of instruments. Asphyxia, which is the strangling of somebody, cutting off their airway, and sometimes that can be detected on the scene by looking at the whites of their eyes, where you see petechia, which is the red spots in the whites of the eyes. Gunshot wounds are a common cause of death and homicides. And then substance abuse. Substance abuse can just be caused by illegal use of substances, or it could have been caused by the improper mixing of illegal substances, and sometimes it could also be caused using substances can be used for committing suicide. An autopsy is a surgical procedure performed by a pathologist on a dead body to ascertain from the body organs and bodily fluids the cause of death. The medical examiner takes into consideration the crime scene evidence, the external body examination, and the internal body examination. Body fluids are collected and sent to the lab for toxicology analysis to determine if there's any outside materials in the person's within the person's body. Manner of death. A death can be considered to be a homicide. Means it was caused by an something from the outside, an outside force. Suicide, self-inflicted death, or either gunshot, overdose, hanging. One of the issues with hanging suicides is there's always a possibility it could be an autoerotic asphyxia, and it takes further investigation of the circumstances because the crime scene may have been cleaned up prior to the police being called. Accidental deaths as a result of an accident, a traffic accident, an industrial accident. Natural causes. Person has some sort of a disease or malady that caused their death. Or undetermined. Based on the evidence available from the body and from the crime scene, it could not be determined whether or not it was an accident, a homicide, or suicide, and the case stays as undetermined, but it can be changed at a later date if new evidence comes forward. Estimating the time of death. There are several terms related to this. First is algor mortis, the body's temperature. Normal body temperature is 98.6 within several degrees of variation. But as soon as the person becomes deceased, the body starts to cool at a rate of 1 to 1.5 degrees Fahrenheit per hour. That's why noting the body temperature at the time the medical examiner gets there, and also noting the temperature at the crime scene at the time is important to determining that the time of death. Livor mortis. Livor mortis is the settling of the blood within the body to its lowest point. If a person is laying on the ground, face up, so they're lying on their back, the blood will end up, and the redness will show at the part of the body closest to the ground due to it being reacted upon by gravity. And this can be helpful if the body was became deceased in one place, was left there for a while, and then moved to another location. That could be an indication that there was another crime scene other than the one where the body was located. Rigor mortis is a medical condition that occurs after death and results in the stiffening of the muscle mass. The rigidity of the body begins within 24 hours of death and then disappears within 36 hours of death. So during that first 24 hours or so, the body is going to get into a stiffening position, and then as decomposition starts to take place, the muscles will start to loosen, and the body will become more flexible. Other things they use for determining time of death is the stomach contents. And determine if they had eaten breakfast or whatever when they're going back and tracking the person's activity prior to death. and decomposition. Decomposition is the body decomposing, and it gets to the point if the body is left long enough, a period of months, the skeletal all it will be is skeletal remains. But you have to look at the decomposition, which is also an indication of the decomposition, the time based on blood activity, especially blowflies, which almost immediately find a body upon its death and will start laying eggs in the eyes, ears, nostrils, and any other openings within the body. Some specialty areas that we'll talk about. You're going to have an advanced course for those of you continuing on in the forensic investigations degree program on forensic anthropology. That's looking at bones, a body that's being discovered with just skeletal remains. It could have been there for a year or more than a year. Could be working, and a lot of times on those issues where bones are left out in fields or forests or whatever, you're going to end up with a scattered bone scene where bones will have been chewed on by animals and removed from the immediate area of the body. So you're going to have a large crime scene in order to track down any evidence. Another area of specialty, when we look at skeletal remains, is facial reconstruction. That's using the measurements of the skull, the size of the skull, to reconstruct the face through placing rubberized materials onto the face, and also making drawings from that sketch. The Lakeland Police Department has a young lady, she's a PSA, who works there and she was into art prior to being employed there, and she turned that skill into becoming a facial reconstruction specialist, went to training on her own and also through the department, and she now does facial reconstruction for the medical examiner's office, the agencies within Polk County, and some other agencies. It's very interesting to talk to, and we will probably have her in as a guest speaker during our criminalistics courses. Another area that is closely related or helps in determining time of death is the entomologist. Entomologists are usually not on the crime lab staff of most small or medium or even some large police agencies, such a specialty, and but they can respond. Major labs usually have one or two available. They can respond, or you can send insects that were collected from the scene, blowflies, the eggs from that the blowflies lay on the body, and there are different body types within their life cycle. Can be sent to the lab to assist in determining time of death. Towards the end of this chapter 6, there is a life cycle chart of blowflies. I would suggest that you look at that and get some idea of what takes place, and we'll talk about that also during the lecture. Another unique thing about blowflies and other bugs that come and feed on the human body is if there is suspected drug use involved, is that you can take those bugs and do tests on them and determine if there was any type of drug in the body at the time of death. Okay, that wraps up the death investigation chapter. As I said, we're going to go into this a lot more thoroughly during the week.